Good morning. Welcome to the Crest Network. I'm Dick Wagner. Today I want to talk about your sales presentation. The topic is your sales presentation leaking? We're going to expand upon that. But I've worked with a lot of salespeople over the years in coaching, and I've run across some that they were leaking just a little bit. They were doing pretty doggone good, just a little bit of tweaking. And then I've run into salespeople. Yesterday I had one that their sales presentation's leaking quite a bit, and it, as often happens when it's leaking really, really bad, many times I have found that the salesperson just will not take coaching. They think they know best. They're either set in their ways, or they are just out of their league. They're just so uncomfortable following the appropriate sales strategies that they ultimately move on to another career. My experience is that salespeople often make a series of mistakes. Some, all of them, some just a few. So we're going to talk about those typical common mistakes that happen. Many salespeople just simply talk too much. They just don't know when to be quiet and listen. They often spew out their sales pitch, and while the customer or the prospect is responding in the course of maybe trying to argue against it or put up a defense because they're not ready or don't want or are not interested. Usually what happens in this case is that the salesman or saleswoman is spending all of their time and not listening, but thinking of ways that they can refute or argue against the prospect's objection. And that's fatal. And in almost every single case, you will lose the sale. We tend to talk too much because we want to pitch our service. Yeah, we run into this. Every single one of us listening here has run into the situation where the salesperson just wanted to hear himself speak. They love the sound of their voice, I guess. Sometimes you tend to talk too much because you're trying to overcome nervousness. And the nervousness comes from failing to do your homework, from failing to prepare for the sales presentation. And when you fail to prepare, it's kind of like figuring it all out on the fly, sort of just simply winging it. I've also found that salespeople don't ask enough questions. Everybody should get into the habit of asking who, what, where, when, why, and how questions. Those open-ended questions encourage the prospect to respond, to talk, to share, to tell you their issues, to tell you their pains. As you notice on the screen, the word why I have in a different color because that's a whole separate ball game. Many times when you ask someone why, it comes across sounding like an accusation or an indictment of them. And so you have to be extremely careful with how you use the word why. Why is very risky, and you shouldn't be using it unless you're very skilled at knowing the appropriate times to use why. Also, if you don't ask them questions, they won't tell you any information. That's pretty straightforward, but so many salespeople simply don't ask questions. I have a whole segment in my coaching on teaching you how to ask power questions, because power questions drive home the point by providing information at the same time you're asking for information. So learn how to use questions that incorporate some statement, in other words, some fact about their industry, the industry that you're working. If you're in a hotel environment, you're talking to the GM of a hotel, learn to ask questions that also include a statement, some information about the hotel industry that demonstrates to that person that you're an insider. Some of those questions might look like this. I'm going to read all four of them because I think that it's important that you see what how they come across. My research shows that you have 37 employees and have been in business for 19 years. Is that fairly accurate? You've sort of combined a statement and facts with a question at the end. How can you possibly know how many employees they have or how long they've been in business if you haven't done any research? The research is out there. It's readily available. Info USA and Sales Genie have that information readily available at your fingertips. If you're a Crest Elite member, we provide those lists to you. In your market, we'll provide you with every single hotel in your market with all of the details that you want to know, from number of employees to square footage of the building to years in business, even to their credit rating. So that information is readily available. Another potential question. My homework also showed that you have about 47,000 square feet in your building. Is that pretty accurate? You see, what you did is you included a statement with your question. And when you included a statement that, in this case, talks about the square footage of their building, there's a good chance that the GM barely even knows the amount of square footage. And that just elevates you. It shows that you are extremely knowledgeable. Another one, we know that the national average for hotel occupancy is around 65 to 66% nationally. What kind of an occupancy rate do you guys average? You see, by stating both, including both a statement and a question, you have told them you're in the know. You're an insider. You know exactly what the average hotel occupancy rate is in the United States. And for your reference, it is 65.5%. So 65, 66%. So when you state that, along with asking the question, what's your occupancy rate on average? Chances are good they know, and that enables them and you to compare it to the national average. If they're running a little bit higher than national average, then all the more reason that they need a pre-disaster plan and someone to call when they need to get heads back in beds. In the last one, what is your number one strategy for maintaining health and safety of your residents? Now, this one's directed at a nursing home environment. So you're in front of a nursing home administrator or the director. When you're asking, what's your number one strategy for maintaining health and safety for your residents, you just hit on two key things. That hotel, or excuse me, that nursing home is focused on the health and the safety of those residents in that nursing home. Those are the two biggest things that they're focused on. And so by you drawing attention to that, tells that nursing home administrator, you're in the know, you're aware, you're knowledgeable, you're an insider to the nursing home industry. And that's extremely valuable. Too many times, just this past week, I had a coaching call with a salesperson who almost word for word said, I just wing it. I don't have time to do research. And so I use a sales presentation that I've used for the past 25 years, and it works great. And so it's really generic. They're taking the one size fits all approach. And it's very clearly known that they don't know the particular industry that they're marketing to. And that's really, really sad, because the one size fits all does not work. And that 25 or 30 years sales veteran that thinks that they know best and can wing it with the right sales pitch, they don't have a very good closing ratio. I asked this particular salesperson, I just started working with him, I asked him what their closing ratio was. He said, oh, I think we're getting up around 40%. And I was shocked, because most of my salespeople, those that I coach, especially those that are selling the prep program to commercial property owners and managers, their closing ratio is in the high 80s. Once you get the appointment, once you are in front of them with a meeting, if you can't close and have a closing average of well above 80%, there's something seriously wrong. And so the generic one size fits all simply does not work. And yes, there are salespeople out there that provide an incredible amount of BS. They're trying to BS their way through the sales presentation. They're not always telling the truth. That's a big problem. They don't know the language or the lingo or the terminologies of the particular industry that they're working with. And as you all know, every single industry, hotels, nursing homes, medical, dental, even the disaster restoration industry, we all have our own lingo. We all use certain acronyms and other language that's very specific to our particular industry. Well, those industries also have their own language. If you don't know details, information, data about your prospect's industry, you're behind the eight ball. You're going to have a terrible closing ratio. You better know their business. Now, here I have knowing their business, but also knowing their industry. Their business is that particular hotel that you're talking with. There's a lot of unique factors about that particular hotel. But in the bigger picture, there is a lot of good information about the hotel industry. And you can even break it down and say there's good information about the hotel industry within the community that you're working in. So you have a lot of homework to do. Folks, poor sales results are usually because you don't have a clear strategy, or you don't have the proper discipline, or you failed to do your homework. Or, and I just ran into this this past week, a salesperson that didn't know how and was not asking for the sale. There's a certain and appropriate way to do that, but they weren't asking for the sale. And then last but not least, with any sale or with any attempted presentation or any stop and visit where you spoke to somebody of significance, you need to get them to commit to the next meeting. And by commit, I mean you need to identify a date and day, a time, a location, an agenda, and all of the parties that will be involved in that next meeting. And if it's not a face-to-face meeting, at a bare minimum, you need to have identified the date, the time, and the agenda of the phone call. If you didn't get them to commit to the next meeting, your sales results are probably pretty poor. You stopped in, you visited, they said, hey, yeah, I'm very interested. Check with me next week. And you say, oh, great. Okay, thanks. See you later. And you walk out and you're all puffed up and you're excited and you're a proud guy because they said they're interested and want to talk to you next week. And then guess what? You failed miserably to get a date, a time, the specifics, an agenda, and know who all's going to be in that meeting. If you didn't do that, almost guaranteed they won't be available to meet with you the next time you come in. Folks, I'm Dick Wagner. You've been watching the Crest Network. I really hope you enjoyed plugging the sales leaks in your sales presentation. Thank you. See you next time.